Hospitals are designed as sanctuaries of safety and healing, but behind one specific, heavily restricted door, the environment is defined by a physical force so powerful it requires a total reimagining of what an ordinary object can do. Professionals call it the projectile effect, or the missile effect. Inside these rooms, a pair of scissors, a floor buffer, or a gas tank instantly transforms into a torpedo flying through the air at speeds that break human bodies. To understand why, we have to look past the common myth of what these machines actually are. Most people picture an MRI as a big beige donut that hums and clicks during a scan. In reality, it is a massive superconducting magnet. Inside that plastic shell sits a coil of wire chilled to nearly absolute zero by a bath of liquid helium, allowing electrical current to circulate without any resistance. This chart compares the strength of clinical scanners, which typically operate between 1.5 and 3 Tesla, to the Earth's natural magnetism. The magnetic field of the entire planet, the force that swings every compass needle in the world, is 30 to 60,000 times weaker than the localized field sitting inside that room. And because the coil is superconducting, there is no off switch. You can't just flip a breaker on the wall. Killing the magnetic field requires a process called a quench, deliberately boiling off the expensive helium to stop the current. Clinics almost never do this, so the magnet stays on. Overnight, on holidays, when the power goes out, the field sits there, completely indifferent to who or what enters the room. In July 2001, 6-year-old Michael Colombini arrived at Westchester Medical Center in New York. Surgeons had successfully removed a benign brain tumor weeks earlier, and Michael was heavily anesthetized in the MRI scanner for a routine follow-up picture to confirm his recovery. Midway through the scan, Michael's oxygen saturation levels began to drop. The small, sedated child was in sudden respiratory distress. The scanner room was equipped with its own dedicated oxygen pipe, fed from an independent tank outside the building. But at the exact moment a child needed it, that piped supply failed. Faced with a broken system, the 2 MRI technologists on duty made an entirely logical decision. They left the control room to find the fault. But the moment they walked out to check the equipment room, the only staff trained to keep metal away from the magnet were removed from the door. Inside the suite, the anesthesiologist was now alone with a suffocating boy and no air. He shouted down the hall for oxygen. Someone outside heard a doctor screaming for help, grabbed a portable supply as fast as they could, and put a heavy steel cylinder directly into his hands at the threshold of the room. The instant the tank crossed the door, the unyielding magnetic field took over. It ripped the heavy metal out of the doctor's grip and launched it into the bore of the scanner at 30 feet per second. The cylinder struck Michael in the head, causing fatal injuries. Every single person involved was rushing, in good faith, to save a 6-year-old boy. The failure occurred because the system was layered in a way where a broken pipe and a desperate human reaction were enough to bypass the only rule that mattered. 24 years later, in Westbury, New York, the environment was entirely different. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon at an imaging clinic. A 61-year-old woman named Adrienne was having a routine scan of her knee. Her husband, Keith McAllister, had driven her there. He was a big guy, a serious lifter who spent the afternoon in the waiting room wearing a piece of workout gear around his neck. It was a 20-pound chain, a heavy loop of metal draped across his shoulders to add resistance to his body weight. When the scan wrapped up, Adrienne asked for help getting off the narrow bed. Keith heard her, stood up, and instinctively walked into the scanner room to lend a hand. Because of how the magnetic force behaves, he felt absolutely nothing at the door. No tug, no resistance, no warning he was crossing a threshold. But as he stepped closer, the field found the chain. A magnet tens of thousands of times stronger than the Earth seized the 20 pounds of steel around his neck. Keith was instantly swept off his feet and hauled straight into the machine, pinned tightly beside his wife. Trapped on the table, Adrienne started screaming the only thing that made sense, to turn the machine off. But there is no button or lever that drops the field. The machine held on exactly as it had from the day it was installed. His wife and the technician grabbed him, trying to physically outmuscle a 3 Tesla superconducting magnet with their bare hands. The chain pulled mercilessly against his throat, forcing his heart to strain against a load it was never built for. By the time a large group of people finally managed to pull him free, the physical toll was too great. Keith suffered a fatal series of heart attacks. The deeply human instinct to rush forward and help a loved one is entirely incompatible with an environment governed by strict physics, a force that offers no warnings, accepts no compromises, and has no emergency stops. The death of Michael Colombini in 2001 led the American College of Radiology to establish its first formal safety panel. This effort produced the blueprint for the zoning and screening rules used in these rooms today. But the legal fallout from that 2001 incident reveals a staggering blind spot in the system at the time. When the state stepped in to penalize the hospital for Michael's death, the only code they could technically fine them under was a medical gas violation. The penalty came to $22,000, roughly what the scanner earned in a few days. That was the official price on paper of a child's life. The repetitive screening questions, the removal of jewelry, and the heavy locked doors represent the thin boundary of hospital safety. These measures stand as the final barrier between human fragility and a physical force that offers no warnings. Millions of MRIs are safely performed every year, quietly saving lives by looking inside our bodies, but they do so while sharing a room with a massive, unyielding force, silent, invisible, and always waiting.